Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. So, I was just told that for those of you who have the book, we're on page 63 of Jnana Yoga. Swamiji is in the midst of explaining different philosophies and explaining why they don't really work to explain the divine presence, the divine being Brahman or Maya, either one. So we'll start here. Attempts have been made in Germany to build a system of philosophy on the basis that the infinite has become the finite. Such attempts are also made in England, and the analysis of the position of these philosophers is this, that the infinite is trying to express itself in this universe, and that there will come a time when the infinite will succeed in doing so. It is all very well, and we have used the words infinite and manifestation and expression and so on, but philosophers naturally ask for a logical, fundamental basis for the statement that the finite can truly express the infinite. The absolute and the infinite can become this universe only by limitation. I'm going to read that again. The philosophers ask for a logical fundamental basis for the statement that the finite can fully express the infinite. The absolute and the infinite can become this universe only by limitation. Everything must be limited that comes through the senses or through the mind or through the intellect. And for the limited to be unlimited is simply absurd and can never be. The Vedanta, so let's just get that grasped. Everything must be limited that comes through the senses or through the mind or through the intellect. And for the limited to be unlimited is simply absurd and cannot be and can never be. The Vedanta, on the other hand, says that it is true that the absolute or the infinite is trying to express itself in the finite, but there will come a time when it will find that it is impossible, and it will then have to beat a retreat. And this beating a retreat means renunciation, which is the real beginning of religion. So notice that when he talks about the Vedanta, he is asking us to hold two thoughts at once. the infinite and absolute, trying to express itself in the universe. That's us. That's the universe itself, but most particularly us. And so, he says, the Vedanta, on the other hand, says that it is true that the absolute or the infinite is trying to express itself in the finite, but there will come a time when it finds that it is impossible and will have to beat a retreat. And this beating a retreat means renunciation, which is the real beginning of religion. In other words, when we stop trying to insist that this universe is a reality, is the reality, and that we can fully express ourselves, or it can fully express itself, we begin to renounce the things of this world, the activities of this world, the attractions and aversions of this world. And this is what the Swami calls beating a retreat. He says this means renunciation, which is the real beginning of religion. When we begin to understand that the experiences that we have through the senses, through the mind, through the intellect, are in fact and must always be limited, but that somehow you and I, behind that is an unlimited essence, an unlimited being, as a verb, being. So then, when we reach this conclusion, then we begin to release the limitations, those things that are limited, in our quest for that which, for the state, for our true state of being, which is the unlimited. And that's what that's why the Swami says, renunciation is the real beginning of religion. Nowadays, it is very hard even to talk of renunciation. It was said of me in America that I was a man who came out of a land that had been dead and buried for 5,000 years and talked of renunciation. So says perhaps the English philosopher. It was said of me, Vivekananda, in America, that I was a man who came out of a land that had been dead and buried for 5,000 years and talked of renunciation. In other words, there's a certain ridiculous quality to what had he to renounce. So says perhaps the English philosopher. Yet it is true that that is the only path to religion. Renounce and give up. What did Christ say? He that loseth his life for my sake, he that loseth his life for my sake shall find it. Again and again did he preach renunciation as the only way to perfection. There comes a time, well, I'll repeat another of Christ's sayings just to underline that. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all else shall be added unto you. All else being the unlimited. Again and again did he preach renunciation as the only way to perfection. There comes a time when the mind awakes from this long and dreary dream The child gives up its play and wants to go back to its mother. It finds the truth of the statement, desire is never satisfied by the enjoyment of desires, it only increases the more, as fire when butter is poured upon it. I don't know if any of you have had the experience of pouring butter on fire. I'm sure some of you have. But when you put particularly purified butter on fire, it flames right up. It's not like putting water on it. So desire is never satisfied by the enjoyment of desires. It only increases the more, as fire when butter is poured upon it. This is true of all sense enjoyments, of all this is true of all sense enjoyments, of all intellectual enjoyments, and of all the enjoyments of which the human mind is capable. Now, mind you, when Swamiji is talking about the mind, he's actually translating the Sanskrit word chitta, mind stuff. The mind stuff is not confined to the brain case. The mind stuff means all of our nervous systems, from the most subtle, that which is worked on by the Chinese acupuncturists, the qi, the subtle energy, it's in Sanskrit prana, up through the autonomic and other nervous systems, and of course, the brain itself. So when he says the human mind, he means the whole apparatus. So I'll start again. This is true of all sense enjoyments, of all intellectual enjoyments, and of all the enjoyments of which the human mind is capable. They are nothing. They are within Maya, within this network beyond which we cannot go. We may run therein through infinite time and find no end. What does he mean by therein? Within Maya. They are nothing. They are within Maya, within this network beyond which we cannot go. We may run therein through infinite time and find no end. And whenever we struggle to get a little enjoyment, a mass of misery falls upon us. How awful is this? And when Swamiji said, how awful is this? This was not an intellectual idea. He felt it in his whole being. He was all heart. How awful that when we struggle for a little happiness, a mass of misery falls upon us. How awful is this? So that's the Swami's great empathy and heart speaking. And when I think of it, I cannot but consider that this theory of Maya, this statement that it is all Maya, is the best and only explanation. What an amount of misery there is in this world. And if you travel among various nations, you will find that one nation attempts to cure its ills by one means, another by another. The very same evil has been taken up by various races, and attempts have been made in various ways to check it. Yet no nation has succeeded. If it has been minimized at one point, a mass of evil has been crowded at another point. if you remember earlier on, he was talking about the tendency of the Christian nations to prey upon other nations, the non-Christian nations, to try to better their circumstances. They have taken from the non-Christian nations. And if many of you know the story of the English in India, fewer of us know the story of the Spanish in the Americas. It's a story of true horror in what we now call Mexico and the nations of South America, particularly Peru, Bolivia, and Chile. The rapaciousness with which the Spanish took the precious metals that were abundant there, but were of not any real significance to the native populations. They were just considered beautiful and decorative, and certainly they were great goldsmiths and silversmiths, made beautiful things of them, but they set no great store by it, as the Europeans did. So this is what the Swami means. It has been minimized at one point. The Spanish nation, the Italian nation, the French nation, the British nation, but particularly the Spanish, the Portuguese, and the Italians, to a lesser extent the French, tried to minimize their misery by creating true horror in Mexico and South America. So this is what he means by a mass of evil has been crowded at another point. If you want to know what I'm talking about, just Google the word Potosi, P-O-T-O-S-I, Potosi, and read what you find there. Thus it goes. The Hindus, to keep up a high standard of chastity in the race, have sanctioned child marriage, which in the long run has degraded the race. At the same time, I cannot deny that this child marriage makes the race more chaste. What would you have? If you want the nation to be more chaste, you weaken men and women physically by child marriage. On the other hand, are you in England any better off? No, because chastity is the life of a nation. Do you not find in history that the first death sign of a nation has been unchastity? When that has entered, the end of the race is in sight. Where shall we get a solution of these miseries then? If parents select husbands and wives for their children, then this evil is minimized. The daughters of India are more practical than sentimental, but very little of poetry remains in their lives. I'm going to repeat that. If parents select husbands and wives for their children, then this evil is minimized. The daughters of India are more practical than sentimental, but very little of poetry remains in their lives. Again, if people select their own husbands and wives, that does not seem to bring much happiness. The Indian woman is generally very happy. There are not many causes of quarreling between husband and wife. On the other hand, in the United States, where the greatest liberty obtains, the number of unhappy homes and marriages is large. Unhappiness is here, there, and everywhere. What does it show? That after all, not much happiness has been gained by these ideals of liberty, personal choice, individualism. We all struggle for happiness. And as soon as we get a little happiness, or on one side, the other side then comes, on the other side then comes, there comes unhappiness. Shall we not work to do good then? Yes, with more zest than ever. But what this knowledge will do for us is to break down our fanaticism. The Englishman will no more be a fanatic and curse the Hindu. He will learn to respect the customs of different nations. There will be less of fanaticism and more of real work. Fanatics cannot work. They waste 3/4 of their energy. It is the level-headed, calm, practical man who works. So the power to work will increase from this idea. Knowing that this is the state of things, there will be more patience. The sight of misery or of evil will not be able to throw us off our balance and make us run after shadows. Shadows meaning the things of the world, the things of Maya. Therefore, patience will come to us, knowing that the world will have to go on in its own way. For instance, all men have become, if, for instance, all men have become good, the animals have in the meantime evolved into men and will have to pass through the same state, and so will the plants. But only one thing is certain. The mighty river is rushing toward the ocean, and all the drops that constitute the stream will in time be drawn into that boundless ocean, the infinite. So in this life, with all of its miseries and sorrows, its joys and smiles and tears, one thing is certain, that all things are rushing toward their goal. And it is only a question of time when you and I and plants and animals and every particle and every particles of life that exists, I think it should be every particle of life that exists, must reach the infinite ocean of perfection, must attain to freedom, capital F, capital freedom, F, to God. Let me repeat once more that the Vedantic position is neither pessimism nor optimism. It does not say that this world is all evil and or all good. It says that our evil is of no less value than our good. Let's repeat that. It does not say that this world is all evil or all good. It says that our evil is of no less value than our good, and our good of no more value than our evil. They are bound together. This is the world, and knowing this, you work with patience. What for? Why should we work? If this is the state of things, what shall we do? Why not become agnostics? The modern agnostics also know there is no solution of this problem. So getting out of this evil of Maya, no getting out. No, there is no solution of this problem. No getting out of this evil of Maya, as we say in our language. Therefore, they tell us to be satisfied and enjoy life. Here again is a mistake, a tremendous mistake, a most illogical mistake. And it is this: what do you mean by life? Do you mean only the life of the senses? In this, every one of us differs only slightly from the brutes. In this, the life of the senses. In this, every one of us differs only slightly from the brutes. I'm sure that no one is present here whose life is only in the senses. Then this present life means something more than that. Our feelings, thoughts, and aspirations are all part and parcel of our life, and is not the struggle toward the it is not the struggle toward the, does that say area? Is someone reading along with me? What does that say? It is not the struggle toward the
It is not the struggle towards the great ideal, towards
great. Oh,
perfection.
I was sure that was a misprint. Okay. And thank you, Brahmadas. And is not the struggle toward the great ideal, toward perfection, one of the most important components of what we call life? Now, so much has been said here, and it's just about the half hour. I'd like to pause and see if there are any comments or questions about what the Swami has been saying, about what Maya is, about what the infinite and absolute are, about what it is we're doing here, rushing toward perfection. It may not seem to us like rushing, but as Sri Ramakrishna remarked, a human life is of only 2 days' duration. We come and go very quickly in cosmic terms. So anything that anyone would like to ask or remark or comment about what has been said or read?
The Swami says, do you not find in history that the first death sign of a nation has been unchastity? By that, does he mean sexual intercourse, unchastity?
All the things that go along with it. Yes, of course it means sexual. It means everything associated with licentiousness and sexuality in its libertine sense. That's unchastity. But it also represents itself in immodesty. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. People being immodest in their behavior, in their dress, advertising themselves. Men do it, women do it. So I think you can remember some lines in a rock and roll song. Wear your pants too tight, your hair combed right, something like that. You're going to be a rock and roll star.
I had a question or two, Brother Shankara. If
yes, please.
If everything's all through. Okay. Well, okay. With regards to the keeping the child marriage, is that what it said?
Child marriage, yes.
Help to keep the nation chaste, I think is what it said.
Mm-hmm.
Was that to mean like the parents marrying the children so that it wasn't as much about like the Westernite kind of thing of trying to find that true love or whatever?
Well, if you marry a child young, they don't go and live with their spouse right away. They continue to live with their in child marriage. They continue to live with their family traditionally, but it prevents child abuse, and it prevents the kind of thing. If you know anything about the Saint Rabia, she was a Sufi saint. Her parents died when she was very young, and she was stolen away and forced into a life of prostitution. So it is no longer the kid. It's no longer prevalent in India, but it was a way of protecting both the boy and the girl from premarital sex, from rape and child abuse, and so on.
Okay. And then my second question was with regard to, I said the good or something, the good being, not worth no more than the evil, or to that effect, and vice versa. Was this just um was it?
Are you familiar with the second law of thermodynamics? The second law of thermodynamics?
I mean, I've heard it before. I can't reel it off the top of my head at the moment, but
That there is a finite amount of energy in universe, and if it's present in abundance in one place, it must be not as abundant in another place. Now, since energy is what creates and sustains life, we could say that its abundance somewhere is good, and its lack elsewhere is evil. But that's a value judgment on what is simply a fact. And so Swami Vivekananda once told the women at a meeting of the Shakespeare Club in Pasadena, California, that they should bow down and worship the prostitute because they held the position that they held in society because the woman of the street was enduring that suffering. A good number of them, more than half, got up and walked out because this idea is so unacceptable to us. But if you look at it logically, if you take this in, it doesn't mean that we condone antisocial action. That's not it. Society is one thing, philosophy is another. We have to have our rules of society. But the idea that good and evil are disconnected in some way, the Swami says, no, this is not true. Where there is an abundance of good in one place, there must be an abundance of evil in another. So looked at dispassionately and logically, both are of equal value. Did that make any sense?
sort of. So okay, so it's essentially just about transcending the duality of things and using the bad to kind of spur yourself on to work for good and make the best of it, essentially. Okay. I was just wondering if there was sort of another, by chance, meaning that he was sort of trying to point to, or I hadn't quite heard it put like exactly like that before.
Well, it is this Swami, when someone asked him about this incident that happened in Pasadena at the Shakespeare Club, he said, oh, don't worry about it. In New York, I have emptied whole halls because of speaking in these terms that were so uncongenial to our judgmental and and puritanical, if you will, Western frame of
Notions.
reference. Good is better than evil. Well,
Yeah.
if you want to read a really wonderful meditation on this, read Barbara Brown Taylor's book, Learning to Walk in the Dark. Learning to Walk in the Dark. It is a magnificent meditation from a truly stellar thinker and writer on what we would call the problem of good and evil. Learning to Walk in the Dark by Barbara Brown Taylor. Anything else from anyone? Thank you very much for those questions. Those were right on the money. That's exactly what we should be doing. We should be straightening these things out before we go on, as much as possible. And of course, we're limited by my understanding. That has to be freely said. I am not Swamiji. And not, it's even a joke. It's even comical to say those words. I mean, Swamiji was a titan. We ride on his shoulders like children.
I was thinking of Amrapali, the courtesan who became she in Buddhist lore, she became a saint. Basically, she attained nirvana.
Mm-hmm.
And
As did Rabia.
Rabia?
Rabia, Rabia. She's the first poet that is in that book, Love Poems from God. She was forced into a life of prostitution when she was just a child. And at the age of 50, someone purchased her freedom for her. And so she was able to live then the rest of her life.
The other thing was on the note, on the point of good and evil, what Sri Ramakrishna says, he says that we need evil to see what good is sometimes. Like when you see, he uses the example of, sometimes when you have bad tenants, you need a ruffian to rough them up.
That's the way it was in the Zamindars, India, anyway.
Yeah, or something along those lines. Where
Oh no, you remember it very correctly. The principle he was illustrating is that there is no light without darkness.
Yes.
There simply is no light without darkness. And the second law of thermodynamics absolutely plays right into this. The Swami doesn't mention it by name, but he alludes to it a couple of times in this talk. Thank you, Divya. Anything else?
Yeah, it seems that this is Keith, by the way.
Yeah, Keith.
It seems that without evil or lower energy, there can be no Maya, because if there's nothing to wade through, then the game cannot be played.
Exactly. As Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi said, human beings are endowed not only with goodness, primarily with goodness, but also with profuse quantities. These are her words translated from the Bengali. They're endowed not only with goodness, but with profuse quantities of materialism and vanity. And then the game can go on with a swing. You're absolutely right, Keith. Maya is a compound of these things. And if we're going to say there's any value to Maya at all, we can't say, well, this part of Maya is good and is valuable, and this part of Maya is not. As you say, there would be nothing to wade through. I like your terms. Wade through, like wading through a mucky, swampy place. Anything else before we go on?
Sorry, just one more follow-up on Maya.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Sri Ramakrishna says that there's two forms of Maya, the avidya and the vidya.
Mm-hmm.
And in the sense that vidya Maya, you know, I guess for lack of a better way of saying it, the good aspects of Maya reveal the ignorance. So like a guru would be an example of Vidya Maya, Vidya Shakti.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I was just thinking of that question.
Precisely. And those avidya Maya is compounded of tamas and the negative aspects of rajas. Vidya Maya is compounded of sattva, the goodness in human beings, and the positive aspects um, of rajas, and for that matter, the positive aspects of tamas, of which are there. I mean, there is no such thing as a lever without a fulcrum, and tamas is the fulcrum for the lever. So, but you used the right word, revealing power. That is the goodness. Thank you, Divya. Anything else before we read on?
Brother Shankara,
Yes.
sometimes I get Maya confused because it seems like sometimes it's talking about illusion and sometimes it's talking about the manifest reality.
Well, the thing is, Dennis, they are the same thing. The manifest reality is what the Swami spoke of a little bit earlier, and will speak of again more powerfully, not just in this talk, but others. It's a dream state. So in that it is illusory. So the manifest reality, what is the manifest reality? That which we can know through our senses, our mind, and our intellect. Inherently, limitations, a state of limitation. That is Maya. Maya is the state of limitation. It doesn't mean that there isn't an intimate and eternal connection between that which is being masked by our ignorance, by the dreamlike nature of Maya, and the eternal absolute infinite. It's there just behind our ignorance. And so when the ignorance is dispelled, as Swamiji said earlier, the most powerful antidote for ignorance is renunciation. We come to the conclusion that the things of the senses, of the mind and the intellect, are not going to satisfy us. And we find through the teachers that there is this representation. There's something behind. And the way to reach it is to stop involving yourself with the things of the senses, the mind and the intellect, which are, by definition, Maya, the dream. Does that clarify it?
It helps a lot to know that it is both. Kind of
Yes.
it is the illusion. And I was struggling with resolving that. So yes,
Yes.
I think it helps. Thank you.
Good. Yes, the fact is, well, some of the great teachers, Vashishta, one of the great teachers of non-dual thinking, non-dual understanding, told Rama that everything that we perceive, and by any means whatsoever, senses, mind, intellect, even the lower forms of the supersensuous, the psychic, he says all of that is nothing more than a vibration of consciousness. And he says it's like the mirage water in the desert, or like a magician's performance, or like a stage show. He uses those three metaphors. It isn't a reality. It is a form of awareness, but the reality lies behind it. Thank you, Dennis. That was good.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, dear.
just to piggyback on Dennis's question, I am just trying to clarify with you. Maya means it's like whatever in a practical, I mean, just to think of as a practical example, like suppose we buy something, we cannot think that is permanent. Like we're not going to take it with us, and that's not going to give us permanent happiness.
I'm sorry, I'm having to cough, so you're going to have to repeat yourself.
Sure.
I tried to
Don't worry.
inhale some tea.
I can repeat.
So please say what you were saying again.
Yeah. Just to piggyback on Dennis's question, I'm kind of have a question in my mind and thinking, is Maya means like, let's say I buy a chair, that's not permanent. It's just practically I need it right now, but I'm not going to take it with me when I die. And that's not the real happiness. So that is what he's trying to explain to us. It's Maya, whatever we either.
Whatever we can perceive,
Yes.
whatever we can perceive through our mind,
Mm-hmm.
through our senses, through our intellect, is inherently a limitation, because those three things are limiters of the infinite,
Mm-hmm.
and create the finite. In one place, Vivekananda says, we are infinite dreamers, infinite dreamers. We are infinite dreamers dreaming finite dreams. And so the finite dream is created by our senses, our mind, and our intellect. And so if you need a chair, you buy a chair.
But it's not permanent.
But it is in no sense permanent. And you know, the Advaitists will convince you, if you listen to them long enough, that there really isn't any chair there. It's just your projection
That's right.
of chairness on matter. And so
yeah.
It's something to listen to Sarvapriyananda make that case. Swami Sarvapriyananda will make the case that there is no chair there. That it's just simply your projection of the idea of chairness on some matter that has been fashioned by other people who believe in chairness. But as you said, the test is how long will it last?
Right. It's not permanent.
It may last several hundred years. It may outlast several of our lifetimes.
10 years.
But it will ultimately, if it's metal, a certain amount of heat will reduce it to its constituents. If it's wood, doesn't take much to release the sunlight that's stored in that wood, and it catches on fire and destroys itself.
That is true. Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, thank you, Brother Shankara. That makes sense. That makes sense. I like Sarvapriyananda's lectures. I heard him in Austin, his lecture in New York, and they're just wonderful. He's an amazing speaker.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
He's a great teacher.
Great teacher, yes, very much. Yes, thank you.
You can find any of you who are interested, Sarva Priya, Sarva Priya, Sarva Priya, Nanda, Nanda. You can find his talks online.
He speaks very eloquently, very intelligently.
Yes.
Very nice. Thank you.
He's one of the greatest lecturers of the Ramakrishna order.
Okay, thank you.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Swayam.
So for most of us, like the non-monastic in dualism, I suppose the renunciation has to be more mental renunciation. And I think we have discussed this a few times in various sessions. So my one question is to sort of affirm that again. And the other question is, the renunciation pertains mainly to things of the world, right? Suppose we spend a whole lot of time in this spiritual pursuit, like whether it's listening to lectures or listening to bhajans or this kind of talk, it does offer some kind of intellectual pleasure or satisfaction as well. So how can we balance that? I mean, we cannot renounce that, I guess. I don't know, I'm confused.
Well, Swayam, as to the first part, don't worry so much about the distinction between monastics and householders. We all practice mental renunciation. What is mental renunciation? Our understanding is that no matter whether we have to be involved with something or not, anything that we can perceive and therefore interact with is ipso facto Maya. And so we say, I don't attach myself to it in any way. I do not attach myself to it in any way. Now, as to the second part of your comment and question, what does Patanjali say in the Yoga Sutras? The way to move toward freedom is to move away from limitation. And so we replace lower forms of thought, speech, and action with higher forms of thought, speech, and action. We replace lower samskaras, to use his terms, with higher samskaras. And what you were just talking about, the lectures, the books, the bhajans, the kirtan, all of that it gives us a different and higher form of joy. And ultimately, what we realize where that joy is coming from. We begin to identify with the enjoyer, which is not the mind, not the senses, not the intellect, but the divine presence that is the indweller and animator of this action and experience machine. We begin to sense, oh, that is what is witnessing and enjoying this. And then our freedom is very near at hand. when we have a sense that we are that. And that is what is. And so then the mental renunciation, that is non-attachment and dispassion toward the things of, toward all things, becomes easier. But that doesn't mean we stop doing those things that are leading us further and further in the direction of freedom while embodied, being jivan mukta, free while embodied. So you're right, the renunciation for all of us. A monastic may live apart from the world, but don't think that the things of the world don't continue to exist within this citta, this mind stuff. All of the things that that are part of the world, you may live apart from them, but they still exist within your samskaras, within your vrittis. And so there's a need for a lot of mental renunciation.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. It's very clear. Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's 8:56. We've spent a profitable number of minutes discussing this, I think. Shall I read on a few minutes, or shall we continue the discussion? Is there anything else that anyone else would like to say or ask?
Yes, curious about something. The Swami says, if, for instance, all men have become good, the animals will have in the meantime evolved into men and will have to pass through the same state. Clearly a reference to reincarnation there.
Yes.
And then he says later, the Vedantic position does not say that this world is all evil or all good. This is the world, and knowing this, you work with patience. So clearly we see that this world has good and evil. I mean, it's very obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm wondering about the Vedantic position of between lives when we leave this body and go to the astral planes. I'm just so curious.
Well, dear heart, we have only the representations of people who say they know about it. Sri Ramakrishna said, don't fuss your mind about it. Just be concerned about what you are and contain in this present moment. And of course, we're curious about what goes. If you wish to read something that is reputed to be authoritative, read the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Evans Wentz's EVANS.
I've read it actually. It talks about the bardo and it prepares.
Bardos, yes, it talks about that time, and there is stuff in the Upanishads about it, and if you the Katha Upanishad will give you some very strong anchor points for thinking about what it means to be. If you remember, Nachiketa's father says, "You're pestering me this way. You want to know what I give you, offer you to? I give you to death. I offer you to death." And so Nachiketa dies. Nachiketa dies and goes to the realm of Yama, and he has to wait there for 3 days because Yama's off on some other business. This is very instrumental to the story because when Yama returns, he says, "Oh my heavens, I kept you waiting. Ask for 3 boons. I kept you waiting 3 days, ask for 3 boons." And the things that Nachiketa asks for culminate in his asking for the knowledge of what is death. And death says, oh, no, I don't want to tell you that. I don't want to give away the store here. Ask for anything else. I'll give you kingdoms. I'll give you the most pleasurable maidens to associate with. Ask for anything. And Nachiketa says, no, I'm not having any. I know the folly of that. That's just more attachment and waste of time, essentially. So he says, give me what I ask for. And so then if you read that portion, which by the way was Swami Vivekananda's favorite Upanishad, and if you want to read an Upanishad that tells you how to be alive in this world and not in this alive in this moment, read the Svetasvatara Upanishad, which was Swami Prabhavananda's, my teacher's favorite Upanishad, because it is a celebration of life. It is a bhakta writing this, the highest form of bhakta, the prema bhakti, about how to be in this world and not worry about anything else but what is, not worry about anything essentially, but understand that you are the divine being in all its glory, and the Svetasvatara is largely about the glory of the divine. You are that in this moment. And it's only your sense of limitation that keeps you from experiencing that. So those are two Upanishads that, and the Chandogya is another good one to read about the nature of both life and death. Thanks for asking.
So Nachiketa kind of asked for all of us, because that's, I think, a question we all think about at some point.
Yes, he did, definitely did. And was aware of it too, that he was asking for all humankind. He said, look, you guys deceive us. You keep us hypnotized. Tell me the truth. You said I had this boon coming to me because of the rules you live by. This is what I want. But that book, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, though very, very difficult to understand.
Agreed.
It does make a very detailed representation of what happens between lives. Anything else? All right.
I just wanted to point out that, as usual, you've given me 4 things to read now. Back to Oprah's book club. This is awesome.
Well, I don't know that you need to read all of them, Keith, but if you do, you'll probably enjoy them. By the way, the most accessible translation of the Upanishads is Swami Prabhavananda's Breath of the Eternal. I say that not to minimize in any way the other translations and commentaries, but the Swami, as was usual in his translations for us here in the West, does not offer commentary. He simply translates what's there in the Upanishads and the Upanishads that he chooses to translate. He renders it in English that we can understand. And when there is a difficulty in understanding an Upanishad, he simply says that and gives a view or two about what some people think it might mean, and then goes on. So that's what I mean by accessible. There are many, many wonderful translations of the Upanishads, but the Swami's is not scholarly. It's meant for being accessible to people like thee and me. Breath of the Eternal.
Brother Shankara,
Yes, Swam.
I think I recall reading in Complete Works, Swamiji says that you may have all the books in the world in your bookshelf, but you will only read those that you are meant to read, or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's so true, because I've had books sitting on my shelf for like 20 years, and all of a sudden my eyes fall on something and then I read it.
Well, good. The keeping your mind focused on the ideal in one way or another is beneficial, is auspicious. It's not a question of good and evil. It's a question of what's good for you, auspicious for you. Keeping your mind focused on the ideal, slowly and slowly. There is no fast way to do it. I'm told this by Swami after Swami. There is no fast way to do it, slowly and slowly. But it can be done in this lifetime. Anything else? This is great. All right, it's a few minutes after 9. We'll pick it up next week with According to the Agnostics. So unless there's anything else from anyone, we'll call it an evening. How great was thy sacrifice, freely choosing thy birth in this prison, our iron age, to unchain us and set us free. Perfect, whom lust could not taint, nor passion nor gold draw near. O Master of all who renounce, fill our hearts full of love for thee. Thou hast finished with fear and with doubt, standing firm in the vision of God, refuge to all who have cast fame, fortune, and friends away. Without question thou shelterest us, and the world's great sea in its wrath seems shrunk to the puddle that fills a hoofprint in the clay. Now that was written about Sri Ramakrishna by Swami Vivekananda. But it's true of every one of the great teachers. They all gathered together the treasure of spiritual knowledge. As Jesus said, I have overcome the world. And it wasn't for himself. He didn't need anything. But so that he could share that with us. Which is why December the 25th, after 2,000 years, December the 25th is still celebrated. Because in our DNA, we know what it is that he did and why. So Ask, as Christ said, ask and ye shall receive. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. So there we are. These great teachers come for no other reason than to set us free. And we can be up and doing and make it our business to accept their invitation or not. It's not that you're bad and wrong for not accepting their invitation. It simply means it's not time yet. So, may you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be cheerful. And may you have peace of mind. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga Durga Durga. May you go forward in Mother's loving and protective embrace. Until the next time we gather, which would be, well, it would be if you wish to join the midnight meditation, that will be tomorrow night from 11:30 to 12:06. And then afterwards, there's a Zoom link for that. And if you choose to stick around for a few minutes after 12:06, after the silence, and have some conversation, that's sweet. That's a nice way to start the year as congregants. And then, of course, on January the 1st at 2:30 in the afternoon, we'll observe Kalpataru Day, the day on which Sri Ramakrishna, January 1st, 1886, January 1st, 1886, he gave illumination to at least 30 people who had come to see him on that day. And it's a remarkable story, and it's uplifting for us and offers us great hope. That's Kalpataru Day. And then this coming Saturday, if you join Rita, there's a Zoom link for that too. Join Rita for her chanting of Sanskrit, Rita Matthew. And then Sunday, the 3rd of January, we will celebrate Sri Sharada Devi's birthday with a birthday celebration and a puja. And we're very fortunate in that the pujari is Aditya Chaturvedi, who's not only a very accomplished pujari, but he truly loves it from the core of his being and can explain to us what it is that he's doing. So those are the next opportunities for us to see one another. Tomorrow night, the next afternoon at 2:30, and then Sunday, the 3rd, starting at 11 a.m. that day, 11 a.m. Atlanta time. So anything else from anyone before we sign off? All right, dears.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Brother Shankara, what about the Saturday talk?
Oh,
Saturday
I'm
class.
sorry. There will be a Saturday class. Yes, of course there will. Wait a minute. Saturday is what? Is that Kalpataru Day? Yeah, that's Kalpataru Day.
Oh, okay.
No, wait a
Okay.
minute. Kalpataru Day is Friday.
Yes.
Be not confused. It is, yes, it's just like last week.
So, right.
The eve is on Thursday and the day itself is on Friday.
So yes, there will, thank you, Swami, for being your detailed and attentive self, detail-oriented and attentive self. There will be a class on Saturday. Yes, so not only, and it was, the time with Rita is from 9 to 10. If you choose to join her for that Sanskrit chanting of the hymns to the mother. And then the class will be as usual on Saturday from 11 to noon.
Thank you.
Doesn't get any easier in your 79th year, I tell you that, to remember all the particulars. I mean, I consult the calendar, so I don't usually miss things, but I don't always remember them either. So ahead of
But I have a vested interest. I just love the Saturday class, so that's why I remembered.
Ah, yes. Swami Vivekananda. We're talking about Bhakti Yoga, the path of devotion. So good night, all. Good night.
Good
Until,
night.
Hari Om.
until next time.
Hari.
Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om.